Celebrating 26.5 years, more than a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1382 with a release and air date of Saturday, August 23, 2025. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone.
Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, on streaming platforms around the planet, and podcast on the internet since 1993, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1382 of This Week in Amateur Radio. AMSAT organizations continue their challenges to AST SpaceMobile's use of the 70cm amateur band. Meanwhile, the company is moving ahead announcing its planned launch window for its satellites. The best of amateur radio is honored with awards from the ARRL. The FCC is opening a rule-making petition to revamp the U.S. emergency alert system. The National Amateur Radio League has announced its upcoming Club Week activities. Candidates are named for ARRL director and vice director positions. The FCC cites a device at a local Florida spa for causing regional interference. The International Amateur Radio Union member societies file comments on the proposed commercial use of 70 centimeters. Wi-Fi is permitted for the first time in the Virginia radio quiet zone surrounding the Green Bank Observatory. Amateurs prepare for the upcoming hurricane season. National Weather has decommissioned several weather satellites and proposes destroying a satellite that scientists and farmers depend on. We will have the details. NASA says that it is possible that Betelgeuse may go supernova soon. And a ham is getting married high in the mountains of Colorado. He is planning an activation as part of his wedding. We will tell you how you can work his mile-high activation in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will explain how to listen to local RF via a web browser. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us aboard the Wayback Machine to March 20, 1923, when Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover convened his second National Radio Conference, and where amateurs are assigned a band of wavelengths for the first time. This week is part one of a two-part series entitled First Band, Top Band. We will stop by and visit with Bill Saliers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters facility, firmly ensconced in Studio A, on the first floor of a nondescript building, just outside of Albany, New York, this is W2XBS.
And reporting from our news bureau in Sandwich, Illinois, where fall sports are in the full swing of things, I'm Jordan Kurtz, Kilo Echo 9, Bravo, Papa Oscar.
And reporting from our news bureau in Cortlandville, New York, where the excitement and anticipation is growing to visit the great New York State Fair, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Albany, New York, in the Geek Cave studios, I'm Rich Lawrence, KB2MOB.
And reporting live from the warm and humid Space Coast in Florida, I am Ed Johnson, W2PH.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, freshly back from the Huntsville Ham Fest. It was great to see everybody down there. I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
And reporting from our Troy, New York News Bureau, where the lawns are all drying out, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our ham radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where the first welcome taste of gorgeous fall weather has arrived early, and tiny maple saplings have already started to change colors. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where warm is the word of the day, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, basking in the AC.
Leading off our news this week, here is an update to a story we've been following for a while now. Facing more than 2,500 complaints from amateurs, AST SpaceMobile has responded by telling the FCC that it has designed its satellites to mitigate interference with amateur radio bands. On August 5th, the company replied to the U.S. Federal Communications Commission defending its plan to use the 430 to 440 MHz radio bands outside the U.S. to track and control its proposed fleet of 248 satellites. The company says it's proposing very limited, non-routine use of the 430 to 440 MHz bands and only for launch and early orbit phases for its satellites or emergency operations when other frequency bands are unavailable. AST SpaceMobile's attempt to justify its use of the amateur radio band for its satellites has done little more to assuage concerns from the ham radio community. AST is again economical with the truth. An amateur radio operator in Germany named Mario Lorenz wrote to the FCC on the August 8th. The amateur radio community says AST is already using those bands. On August 8th, AMSAT Deutschland sent a letter to the FCC that says amateur radio users have detected signals from AST's satellites over the radio bands. The claim is therefore either a misrepresentation or a deliberate falsehood. AMSAT Deutschland wrote, in particular, AST's Blue Walker 3 satellite was spotted using the radio band up until July 23rd as the amateur radio community began campaigning against the spectrum use. It also raises questions about AST's technical maturity, the group added. Other large-scale satellite operators, such as SpaceX, with over 6,000 Starlink satellites in orbit, appear to manage telemetry, tracking, and command functions without resorting to use of amateur UHF band.
AST SpaceMobile, which has asked the FCC for permission to use amateur radio frequencies for a planned constellation of satellites providing cellular-based broadband service, has announced it expects to have launched between 45 and 60 satellites by next year. In its second quarter earnings report this month, the Texas company said that it plans satellite deployments every 1 to 2 months into 2026 and expects to begin providing service in the United States by the end of this year. In the first quarter of next year, the company hopes to begin rolling out service as well in Canada, the UK, and Japan. In two separate deals pending, the company is planning to acquire use of portions of the S-band and L-band spectrum for global delivery of its services. AST SpaceMobile, which is considered a rival to SpaceX, was recently approved to use the amateur radio band on an experimental basis for a low Earth orbit satellite, a prototype known as FM1. It was assigned the call sign WP2XRX, which is valid through July 1st of 2027. The company plans to use the 70-centimeter amateur frequencies to conduct telemetry, tracking, and telecommand between ground stations and its satellites.
ARRL honors the work of amateur radio operators who grow the hobby by advancing technology used within and the operating culture of amateur radio service. With more details on these awards, we go to League headquarters, where John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this special report.
At the second meeting of the ARRL Board of Directors, hams and journalists who have covered amateur radio were honored with their awards. The 2025 ARRL Technical Innovation Award went to Matthew Wishick, NB0X, for his work on development of opulent voice minimum shift keying transceiver implementation and modern module architecture. The 2025 Technical Service Award was issued to Bill Miera, N2CQR, and Dean Suleilas, KK4DAS, who have developed and facilitated the Solder Smoke Education Project, which has enabled high school students and many amateur radio operators to construct a working HF receiver. The ARRL Herb S. Breyer Instructor of the Year Award was awarded to Dennis Simon, KB7UTV. The The ARRL Hiram Percy Maxim Memorial Award went to Alexa Snethen, KM6LGG. She is also the recipient of the 2025 ARRL Foundation Goldfarb Memorial Scholarship. The Philip J. McGann Silver Antenna Awardee is Micah Martin, KN6VUT of California. He has been recognized by his peers for his exemplary service in the Tehachapi Amateur Radio Association as the club's public information officer, for leading to a 59% increase in club membership and nearly tripling the number of licensed applicants in the area. And the 2025 Bill Leonard Professional Media Award for print reporting was given to McKenna Kelly and Del Cameron of Wired for their article, Through Hurricanes Helen and Milton, Amateur Radio Triumphs When All Else Fails. The award for video reporting was bestowed on NBC Today correspondent Harry Smith for his report, Meet the Students Using Radio Waves to Contact the ISS. More information about ARRL awards along with nomination instructions can be found on the ARRL website. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
The RRL Technical Service Award is given annually to individuals who are licensed radio amateurs whose service to the amateur community and the society at large is of the most exemplary nature within the framework of amateur radio technical activities. The ARRL Herb S. Breyer Award, Instructor of the Year, recognizes the best in amateur radio instruction and recruitment in the memory of Herb S. Breyer, W9AD, a silent key, a longtime CQ novice editor, who represented the spirit of effective caring amateur radio instruction. The ARRL Hiram Percy Maxim Memorial Award is given annually to a licensed radio amateur under the age of 21, whose accomplishments and contributions to both the community of amateur radio and the local community are of the most exemplary nature. The Philip K. McGann Silver Antenna Award is given to a licensed radio amateur for volunteer public relations efforts on behalf of amateur radio, who best exemplifies the public relations efforts of Philip J. McGann, WA2MBQ, also silent key. The Bill Leonard Professional Media Award pays tribute to the late CBS News president Bill Leonard, W2SKE, by recognizing professional journalists whose outstanding coverage highlights the enjoyment, importance, and public service value of the amateur radio service.
This week, the FCC commissioners unanimously voted to open a rulemaking to consider a ground-up re-examination of the national alert and warning systems, including the emergency alert systems, EAS, and the wireless emergency alerts, or WEA. The Commission says this action will explore whether fundamental changes to these systems could make them more effective, efficient, and better able to serve the public's needs. The United States maintains national capabilities that provide the President and other government authorities with the ability to send emergency alerts to the public. These capabilities include EAS, which provides emergency alerts to the public via radio, television, satellite, and cable systems, and WEA, which provides emergency alerts to supported mobile devices. With underlying frameworks that are 31 and 13 years old, respectively, the time is right to explore if structural changes to these systems are needed, with an eye toward making sure the FCC is leveraging the latest technology to save lives. Among the goals of the rulemaking are to seek comment on the objectives for effective alert and warning systems, explore which entities need to be able to send alerts to fully accomplish these objectives, how these needs should be addressed in the design of alerting systems, consider the alert transmission capabilities that a national public alert and warning system must have to achieve its objectives, including the need for resilience, geographic targeting, and security. Ask whether EAS and WEA are meeting the needs and expectations of both the public and alerting authorities, and if not, whether redesign or targeted changes would allow EAS and WEA to fully reach their potential, and examine both the types of information and distribution methods needed to effectively convey information to the public through both the emergency alert system and the wireless emergency alert system.
This fall, the National Amateur Radio Alliance, the NARA, will sponsor Club Week, a special event for clubs to make contact with one another on the air. Unlike a contest, Club Week does not involve earning points or submitting logs to NARA. Instead, it's a relaxed and engaging event where clubs can operate from a club shack, a member's home, a park, or any public location. Clubs are encouraged to organize additional activities to make the most of this opportunity. Participants should be prepared to send and respond to QSL cards, which provides additional opportunities to engage and teach new hams. Club Week will span 9 days. While a final date hasn't yet been finalized, clubs can register early for the event on the National Amateur Radio Alliance website. The National Amateur Radio Alliance serves as a central hub of resources for amateur radio operators. National association built for today's ham radio community, NARA focuses on 4 key areas: resources, engagement, outreach, and advocacy, ensuring that operators, clubs, and communities have the support they need to grow, connect, and lead in a changing world.
The 2025 hurricane season has been underway for almost 2 months, and there is activity on both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Here with more details on how amateurs are preparing for the upcoming hurricane season, we go to League headquarters where John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this special report.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, predicted in June there would be 13 to 18 named storms, 5 to 9 hurricanes, and 2 to 5 major hurricanes, Category 3 or greater, for the 2025 season. And this aligns with Colorado State University's forecast for 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes, supported by warm Atlantic Sea surface temperatures. All indications point to an above-average season. Tropical Storm Chantal made landfall in the Carolinas with high winds and flooding in July, and now Tropical Storm Erin has formed in the Central Atlantic and is moving west with 45-mile-per-hour winds. Erin is expected to become the first hurricane of the season over the weekend. Josh Johnston, KE5MHV, ARRL Director of Emergency Management, said that Erin is expected to stay mainly off the coast, but there may be some impact to the Caribbean, including Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. These early storms remind us now is the right time for amateur radio operators to begin thinking about how they can help if and when these storms begin to ramp up and cause damage, said Johnston. We know that conventional communications can fail, and amateur radio will be there to fill the gap. Johnston added that hams should check their equipment, including radios, antennas, and power supplies, and know the emergency frequencies used during activation. The voice-over Internet protocol Hurricane PrepNet now runs weekly on Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, an active forum for situational updates, net control recruitments, and emergency coordination. The Hurricane WatchNet keeps tabs on tropical storms and hurricanes and activates its nets on 14.325 MHz upper sideband by day and 7.268 MHz lower sideband by night. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
What amateur radio operators do now to prepare for these dangerous and damaging storms will make a difference, noted Johnston, and help save lives. Information about the ARRL Amateur Radio Emergency Service and how you can be active in your local area can be found at www.arrl.org/ARES.
As the United States government has announced previously, the remaining satellites in the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's legacy constellation of polar operational environmental studies are in the process of being decommissioned. The Polar Operational Environmental Studies System satellite, known as NOAA-15, was to be taken out of service on the 12th of August and another, NOAA-19, on the 19th of the month. Earlier this year, both were declared in the end-of-life stage, along with a third constellation satellite, NOAA-18, which was decommissioned in June. For years, these satellites were relied upon by many for vital weather data via their 137 MHz APT transmissions, providing data used in monitoring the environment, forest fires, volcanic eruptions, and global vegetation. Although previous reports said that the satellite's transmissions would continue, an article on the RTL-SDR website said that the transmitters will be turned off. The end-of-life status means they are no longer eligible for repair or recovery efforts, and NOAA advises that they should not be considered reliable sources of information for critical or emergency purposes. None of the satellites are scheduled for deorbiting. NOAA issued an advisory on its website saying direct users should make plans to discontinue use of the Polar Operational Environmental Studies data.
According to the Associated Press, hundreds of jobs that were eliminated by cuts from the Department of Governmental Efficiency are to be refilled at the National Weather Service, which has been told it can hire as many as 450 radar technicians, meteorologists, and hydrologists. A recent network news report said the rehiring comes as the agency looks back on the deadly floods that ravaged Texas last month, while preparing for the arrival of hurricane season in a few weeks. The news reports noted that the cuts have led to many agency staffers taking on larger workloads and longer hours, and cited the reduction in data available to the Weather Service, the result of fewer launches of weather balloons. Meteorologist Louis Uccinelli, a former director of the National Weather Service, told the syndicated Associated Press that the hirings were great news for the National Weather Service and the American public, adding that he would like to see them get underway. He was the National Weather Service director from 2013 until he stepped down in 2022.
The Trump administration has asked NASA employees to draw up plans to end at least 2 major satellite missions, according to current and former NASA staffers. If the plans are carried out, one of the missions would be permanently terminated because the satellites would burn up in the atmosphere. The data the 2 missions collect is widely used, including by scientists, oil and gas companies, and farmers who need detailed information about carbon dioxide and crop health. They are the only 2 satellite missions federally funded that were designed and built specifically to monitor planet-warming greenhouse gases. It is unclear why the Trump administration seeks to end the missions. The equipment in space is state-of-the-art and is expected to function for many more years, according to scientists who worked on the missions. An official review by NASA in 2023 found that the data are of exceptionally high quality and recommended continuing the mission for at least 3 more years. Both missions, known as the Orbiting Carbon Observatories, measure carbon dioxide and plant growth around the globe. They use identical measurement devices, but one device is attached to a standalone satellite, which the other is attached to the International Space Station. The standalone satellite would burn up in the atmosphere if NASA pursued plans to terminate the mission. Presidential budget proposals are wish lists that often bear little resemblance to final congressional budgets. The Orbit Carbon Observatory missions have already received funding from Congress through at least the end of the 2025 fiscal year, which ends September 30th. Draft budgets that Congress is currently considering for next year keep NASA funding basically flat. But it's not clear whether these specific missions will receive funding again, or if Congress will pass a budget before current funding expires on September 30th. Last week, NASA announced it will consider proposals from private companies and universities that are willing to take on the cost of maintaining the device that is attached to the International Space Station, as well as other device that measures ozone in the atmosphere. The missions are called Orbiting Carbon Observatories because they were originally designed to measure carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But soon after they launched, scientists realized that they were also accidentally measuring plant growth on Earth. Basically, when plants are growing, photosynthesis is happening in their cells, and that photosynthesis gives off a very specific wavelength of light. The Orbiting Carbon Observatory's instruments in space measure that light all over the planet. NASA and others have turned this happy accident into an incredibly valuable set of maps of plant photosynthesis around the world, explains Scott Denny, a longtime climate scientist at Colorado State University who worked on the OCO missions and is now retired. Lo and behold, we also get these lovely high-resolution maps of plant growth, he says, and that's useful to farmers, useful to ranch land, and grazing and drought monitoring, and forest mapping, and all kinds of things in addition to CO2 measurements. The cost of maintaining the 2 Orbiting Carbon Observatory satellite missions up in space is a small fraction of the amount of money taxpayers already spent to design and launch the instruments. The two missions cost about $750 million to design, build, and launch, according to David Crisp, a retired NASA scientist. By comparison, maintaining both orbiting carbon observatory missions in orbit cost about $15 million per year, Chris says. The money covers the cost of downloading the data, maintaining a network of calibration sensors on the ground, and making sure the standalone satellite isn't hit by space debris, according to Crisp. Recent media reports about the directive have said no reason has been given for the terminations, which would destroy one of the satellites and its sensitive instruments because the spacecraft would burn up on re-entry to Earth's atmosphere. The other satellite is attached to the International Space Station. Crisp goes on to say, just from an economic standpoint, it makes no economic sense to terminate NASA missions that are returning incredibly valuable data.
During the Atlantic hurricane season, many residents of Sun City Center, Florida, might feel as if they are living in Storm City Center instead. A disaster radio program, managed by the Kings Point Amateur Radio Club, has been growing strong within this retirement community to address those concerns. Launched 6 years ago, the program has woven an increasingly robust safety net and now provides assurance to as many as 800 residents, most of them between 70 and 80 years of age. It is all overseen by Eileen Bishop, AB9T, the club's emergency communications chair. Low-power family radio service radios are provided to those who pay a $15 program registration fee at the community clubhouse. The little handheld transceivers, which do not require a license, connect them to any of 25 control stations around the community who can monitor and transmit on a common channel using their own licensed GMRS radios. According to Club Vice President Eric Nissenfeld, WA4EMN, most of these operators are also hams. The control center, Radio Alpha, is based at the clubhouse, and hams there monitor the system as well. The control stations and Radio Alpha can both summon the appropriate emergency service when necessary. Eric said associates are asked to check in at weekly nets at least 4 times a year to receive signal reports and ensure all is working properly. Homeowners associations and community managers are also being added to the network. Sun City Center may not be able to stop the hurricanes, but with the power of radio, they can help residents brace for them.
ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, has announced that the candidates for the 2025 ARRL division elections are now official. ARRL members will choose between 4 candidates for director in the Southeastern Division, 2 candidates for director in the Pacific and Southwestern Divisions, and 2 candidates for vice director in the Southwestern Division. The directors in the Rocky Mountain and West Gulf divisions are unopposed, as are the vice directors in the Pacific, Rocky Mountain, Southeastern, and West Gulf divisions. Declared elected without opposition in the Rocky Mountain Division, Director Jeff Ryan, K0RM, who has held the position since 2018, and Mel Perkins, NM7P, who ran uncontested for the position of Vice Director. In the West Gulf Division, Director John Robert Stratton, N5AUS, and Vice Director Lee Cooper, W5LHC, both have held these positions since 2019. In the Pacific Division, Vice Director Carol Malazzo, KP4MD, who was appointed to the position in July 2025. In the Southeastern Division, Vice Director Andrew Maluzzi, KK4LWR, who has held the position since 2024. The contested seats are as follows. In the Pacific Division, Director John Litz, NZ6Q, will face challenger Bob Valayo, W6RGG, who has previously served as a Vice Director, Director, and Second Vice President. In the Southeastern Division, Director Mickey Baker, N4MB, will face challengers Jim Kavuk, K8JK, a former Michigan section manager, Scott Roberts, KK4ECR, who is the Northern Florida section manager, and Tom Schaefer, NY4I. In the Southwestern Division, Director Richard Norton, N6AA, will face challenger Rick Paquette, W7RAP, who is the Arizona section manager. John Kitchens, NS6X, The Santa Barbara section manager will face challenger David Ginsberg, N3 BKV, for the position of vice director. Balloting for contested seats will take place this fall. Votes will be counted and successful candidates announced in November. Candidates declared elected will assume their roles for terms beginning January 1st, 2026. ARRL is governed by its board of directors. Elections are held for 5 of the 15 ARRL divisions each year, for terms of 3 years.
The U.S. Federal Communications Commission voted this week to conduct a full review of the National Emergency Alert System. The move comes after outraged Texans say they did not receive timely warnings in the lead-up to last month's deadly storms and had issued a notice of proposed rulemaking. U.S. Senator John Cornyn of Texas has been urging the FCC to reevaluate and take on the modernization of the nation's alerting systems, zeroing in on the failure of the EAS systems utilized during the fatal flash flooding. As you are aware, the state of Texas was recently impacted by catastrophic flash flooding that took the lives of more than 130 Texans, including dozens of children, the senator wrote in a letter to the FCC dated July 29th. This disaster shocked the nation and ignited a vigorous discussion on how our emergency alert system and wireless emergency alerts can be improved to mitigate future loss of life during major disasters, Cornyn said. Although the emergency alerts had been transmitted as designed by the system, the Republican senator said in his letter that it is the responsibility of Congress and the FCC to constantly evaluate whether the design can be improved. It appears the FCC agreed. On Thursday, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr announced on X the Commission's plans to launch a top-to-bottom review of both the emergency alert system and the wireless emergency alert program. The FCC said the ground-up review is necessary to determine if fundamentally changing the current system's structural design will make them more effective, efficient, and better able to serve the public's needs. The EAS and WEA systems are designed to allow the U.S. President and government authorities to send national emergency alerts to the public. The EAS communicates public alerts through radio, television, satellite, and cable systems, while the WEA sends its alerts to mobile devices. According to the FCC, the current systems run on underlying frameworks that are between 13 and 31 years old. Part of the review will examine whether the types of information transmitted and their distribution methods are as effective as they can be, considering both the public and emergency officials. The need for resilience, geographic targeting, and security will also be examined. On August 1st, the FCC, along with the Homeland Security Bureau and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, issued its own public EAS security advisory urging authorities responsible for maintaining EAS and WEA equipment to update their software immediately to the most recent versions.
Betelgeuse, the massive red supergiant star located about 650 light-years from Earth, is showing exciting signs it might soon explode into a brilliant supernova. When this happens, it will be one of the brightest events ever seen in the night sky, possibly shining so brightly it could even be visible during the day. This means for weeks or even months, people on Earth could see what looks like a second sun lighting up the sky. The explosion of Betelgeuse will produce light so intense it might rival the brightness of a full moon. This rare cosmic event is the front-row chance for humanity to witness a supernova close enough to see with the naked eye. Although this powerful explosion will be dazzling, it poses no danger to Earth. Instead, it marks an extraordinary moment in space history, the first time humans will get to watch a nearby star's dramatic death close up. The supernova will be millions of years in the making, but the signs now tell astronomers that Betelgeuse is preparing for the final act. Once the star bursts, the sky will transform in a way that only the universe can create, a breathtaking spectacle combining science, wonder, and cosmic beauty. High on Orion's shoulder, the colossal red supergiant is roughly 650 light-years away, nearing the dramatic end of its stellar life. This isn't just any star. Betelgeuse is 10 to 20 times more massive than the Sun, burning through its fuel at a furious pace. In recent years, especially during its mysterious dimming in 2019 and 2020, the star has shown unusual behavior, leaving astronomers to wonder, is it a long-anticipated supernova about to erupt? If so, the spectacle will be breathtaking. For weeks or months, a single point of light would blaze brighter than the full moon. shining clearly even in daylight. The explosion would hurl vast amounts of energy and elements into space, seeding the galaxy with the raw materials for future stars and planets. I wonder what we'll do for amateur radio. So keep your eyes on the night sky. The universe is ready to put on one of the most unforgettable shows ever, reminding us of how incredible and alive the cosmos really is.
Stealth Antennas for Ham Radio is full of antennas to get you on the air no matter where you live. Even radio amateurs who live with antenna restrictions or covenant limitations will find solutions in this new book. Learn how to install a multiband vertical that looks like a flagpole, or how to run an end-fed random wire along your roof, so the neighbors never notice. If you are looking for an invisible repeater connection, try the Ham walking stick. If you want 5 bands but cannot put wires in trees or display anything even remotely antenna-like, try the compact Stealth Inverted L. Stealth Antennas for Ham Radio will also help hams who want to stay unnoticed by neighbors. There are ideas for small lots, covenant-restricted properties, and many other living situations. Steve Ford, WB8IMY, kicks off the collection with safe, effective, and ethical stealth operation. Stealth operating can be highly rewarding if you understand your limitations and work to alleviate them as much as possible, Ford says. Try out these 28 unobtrusive stealth antennas today. Look at the new books area on the League's website.
Each year during Hamcation in Orlando, Florida, deserving contributors to the amateur radio community are recognized. These individuals or groups have demonstrated exceptional commitment, dedication, and tenacity supporting the amateur radio community. Kicking off the 2026 Hamcation Award season, nominations are now open on the Hamcation website. For 2026, there will be 3 award categories: the Gordon West Ambassador of the Year, the Carol Perry Educator of the Year, and a new category, the Amateur Radio Hero of the Year. This new category recognizes groups or individuals who selflessly went above and beyond in providing their skills, equipment, and time for communications duty in the public service during a disaster or moment of need. For more details on all awards, please visit the Hamcation website. Links to each award category can be found with details of their criteria and the nomination forms. The Hamcation team looks forward to receiving nominations for deserving organizations, groups, or individuals for each of the 3 categories from both within and outside the USA.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX as part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, AJ8B. As of this Saturday, there will be 123 days until Christmas. Time is really flying, so we better get started. I apologize tonight for my disheveled appearance. I've been outside repairing the hex beam that was sent down in a storm a couple weeks ago. Finally got the spreaders fixed. My son helped me get it elevated and got the guy wires done. So just in time for the Ohio QSO party this weekend, and hoping to pick up some multipliers all around the country, and especially with those guys in Hawaii with their state QSO party. So if you hear AJ8B on the air this weekend, give me a call. The DX word for the week is QRZ.com. Not quite one word, but QRZ.com is a widely recognized website in the amateur radio community. Frankly, I don't know of any amateur who doesn't use it. Founded in 1992 by Fred Lloyd, it began as a CD-ROM database of U.S. ham radio call signs sourced from the FCC. Today, it has evolved into a global online platform that lists nearly every amateur radio call sign worldwide. The name QRZ comes from the Q code for Who is Calling Me, a fitting reference to its core function, helping ham radio operators identify and connect with each other. Key features of QRZ.com include call sign lookup. Users can search for ham radio call signs globally with data pulled from the FCC and other national databases. Personal web pages. Registered users can create custom profiles showcasing their radio setups, personal interests, and contact info for QSL card exchanges. Discussion forums, a vibrant community space for sharing knowledge, troubleshooting, and discussing equipment and techniques. Marketplace, users can list and browse ham radio gear for sale. And articles and tutorials, educational content for both beginners and seasoned operators. According to SEMrush, QRZ.com receives approximately 3.47 million visits per month. Half of those are mine, probably. This places it firmly among the top websites in the telecom category, underscoring its significance in the amateur radio community. They don't require any donation for you to sign up and create an account, but if you do have an account, why don't you consider a donation? Even $20 would help offset some of their costs. And I've had some big time costs with new servers and a huge database, and a couple of my friends are now developing for them. So, hey, help them out. Here's an opportunity for those of you that would like to go on a de-expedition. An upcoming operation is looking for single sideband operators to join for this fall's CQ Worldwide single sideband event. The QTH is Gingerbread Hill in St. Peter's, Montserrat. KB4YPM, Corey, will be there October 22nd to the 28th and is taking 2 stations. He says he could take a third if he can find a third amplifier as well. Anyone wanting to join him would be helpful. You don't have to be there all the days if you don't want to, but he could really use the help for the weekend single sideband contest. He is waiting for the official call sign to be issued from the officials in Montserrat. You can contact me, the dxmentor@gmail.com, and I can hook you up. And we also have a 3 Yankee 0 Kilo Bouvet Island update from Ken, LA7GIA. And what's interesting is the very first update that I gave you was 16 months ago. And it seemed like January of 2026 was so far off, it's like, why are we even mentioning it? Well, you know what? We're only a few months away now. Here's what Ken had to say, quote, "All equipment is bound for Oslo this week and next. The logistics involved in getting all the equipment selected, designed, tested, packed, and shipped to Norway has involved many persons, manufacturers, helpers, and hard work for a long time. We started developing the 3Y0K de-expedition in April of 2023, and it has been taking us more than 2 years to get to the stage where soon all the equipment will be loaded into a container located in Nittedal, just outside of Oslo, Norway. This container will not only be loaded with equipment, but other essentials like tents, provisions, safety and emergency equipment, evacuation gear, QRO generators, and a lot more. Our goal is to conduct a safe and sound de-expedition where our ability to adapt to the changing conditions is important. 4 team members have experience from Bouvet Island 2023 and know what to expect. I can guarantee we will get on shore. We hope to be loud with the ICOM America Incorporated radios and ACOM amplifiers supported by DX Engineering hardware. In just 2 weeks, we will pay the $400,000 vessel deposit, and by that time, we will have shipped the container in mid-September. That will bring us to a total spend of $1 million on this de-expedition thus far, in addition to thousands of hours of hard work, end quote. So here's another case where if you can help 3 Yankee 0 Kilo out, they have a webpage, go there and make a donation. This is, for me, has been maybe 2 operations in my 50 years of DXing. And I would also encourage you, if you're just listening this for general interest, you don't consider yourself a DXer, you're going to want to work these guys because it may be another 20 years before they're on again. So that way, if you ever do turn to DX, you already have it in the log. Each week, I try to focus on those entities that will be available in the next 7 days. There's so much data to sift through that I thought a focus on just the next 7 might be helpful. Here's what you should find QRV when you tune the bands. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. So here we go. Janus, SP9FIH, is preparing for his de-expedition to Lord Howe Island, operating under the call sign of VK2/SP9FIH. The de-expedition is scheduled to run from August 27th to April 13th. So till September 13th, just outside of the 7-week window I mentioned, but just barely. So you might want to get ready for that one. Aldir PY1SAD is headed back to 8 Radio, which is Guyana, where he is QRV in his spare time as 8 Romeo 1 Tango Mike until September 23rd. He's been on CW, sideband, and digital modes on all bands. Daya YI1IDZ is back in Juba, South Sudan as Zulu 81 Delta for a month and on the air mostly weekends on sideband and FT8. He has improved his antennas and his QRV on 80 through 10 meters. And you can QSL Z81 Delta through OM3JW. Andy, 5 Zulu 4 Victor Juliet, is scheduled to operate this weekend from a site near Mount Longonot with a view of Lake Navisha. Operations are planned for the low bands 30, 40, 60, 80, and 160, mainly using CW and FT8 modes, depending on local noise levels. Equipment will include an amplifier and receive antennas. You can QSL 5 Zulu 4 Victor Juliet via M0URX. Nancy Kilo 8 Oscar, who is also VE3 ISD, Charles, has a trip to the Nala region of Tanzania coming up at the end of the month. He departs for Tanzania on August 29th, arriving the following day with his first possible operating time on August 31st. He'll be QRV as 5 Hotel 3 DX in his spare time until September 21st. Quote, operation will likely be catch as catch can on breaks or whenever I can get away for a bit, he says, end quote. He'll have a KX3 and a KXPA 100 running 100 watts, a QMX and QDX both running 5 watts. For antennas, he'll have a ground-mounted vertical and dipoles. Look for him on CW mainly, but also on FT4 and FT8 on 10 through 28 MHz during the daytime hours. Charles notes that Tanzania is 3 hours ahead on UTC, so take that into account. Delta Lima 1, Bravo, Juliet Oscar, Robert, is traveling through the Arctic Islands until September 9th. He's currently on Svalbard until August 24th, operating as Juliet Whiskey Stroke, Delta Lima 1, Bravo, Juliet Oscar. He will next be QRV as Oscar X-Ray Stroke, DL1BJO from Greenland, starting August 26th until September 4th. He wraps up his trip from Iceland as Tango Fox Stroke, Delta Lima 1, BJO from September 5th to the 8th. Listen for him on CW on 40 through 10 meters, but most likely on 20 and 17. And you can QSL all of these via DL1BJO, LOTW, Club Log, EQSL, and the German Delta Lima Bureau. Italy Kilo 7 Whiskey Uniform Lima, Antonio, is now in Benin, which is Tango Yankee, and plans to be crossing the border multiple times into Toga, 5 Victor. If he can operate as Tango Yankee 2 Alpha Alpha while in Benin and 5 Victor 0 DX in Toga, he will try through September 7th. QSL via IK7WUL. Tango X-Ray 14 Tango Oscar Mike started yesterday from French Polynesia, which was FO, and goes to August 31st from Tahiti. The ops are F4 DPA and F1 SXC. And with them, they have an SWL, Tom, who is only 14 years old. The station is an FT897 and TS50, 100 watts to a Wyndham and Buddy Pole portable dipole, single sideband. Probably, they say, on just the higher bands. They will upload to LOTW and apparently Club Log regularly. Chris, VK2YUS, is QRV as Yankee Juliet 0 Charlie Alpha from Port Vila, Vanuatu from August 20 to the 30th, 2025, using sideband on 40 to 10 meters with simple wire antennas and an IC 7300 and 400 watt amplifier. Operating hours are mainly at night, 2100 Zulu to 1000 Zulu. He prefers paper logbooks and will send QSL cards by mail in October. And you may have remembered a few months ago, we had a report about how the the land in Vanuatu is shrinking quickly. And in fact, in a few years, it was estimated they may not be an island anymore. So kind of in a grim kind of a way, I would try to work these guys if you don't have them. If you're interested in DX podcast and YouTube channels, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept up to date on all of DX activities. Contest updates. I know that the ARRL contest sheet is read elsewhere in the podcast, and the contests that I mention are sometimes redundant. However, there are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or work on an all-time new one. The first to talk about is the U.S. Islands QSO Party. The purpose of this is to promote the U.S. Islands Award Program to amateur radio operators worldwide, to promote verifiable amateur radio contacts with stations located on islands in the U.S. and its territories and protectorates. The goal is that U.S. islands can work everyone. Non-island stations can only work U.S. island stations. This contest runs from 1200 Zulu August 30th to 0300 Zulu on August 31st. The bands you can use are 160 through 6 meters, excluding the work bands, which are 30, 17, 12, and then also the 60 meter channels. The second contest to mention is the Worldwide Digital DX Contest. The purpose of this contest is for amateurs around the world to contact as many other amateurs in as many Maidenhead grid fields as possible using FT8 and FT4 modes. The exchange is simple. It's your 4-letter grid square. The contest period is Saturday, August 30th from 1200 UTC to Sunday, August 31st at 11:59:59 UTC. The valid bands to use for FT8 and FT4 are 160, 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters. Let me know if you are participating in either one of these and how you do. Please send me an email if you need any details on any of the topics that we discussed or if you have a question. And again, it's thedxmentor@gmail.com. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups. Have a great DX week.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Recently, I discussed the idea of listening to the radio spectrum across the internet for the purposes of getting signal into your shack when radios, or in my case antennas, are causing you challenges. I continue to explore and discovered a project by Yakobo Echo Alpha 1 India Tango India called Radio Receiver. Behind that unassuming name lies a tool born in 2014 that allows you to plug an RTL SDR dongle into your computer, open up your web browser, and listen to the radio signals that your dongle can receive. In case you're unfamiliar, an RTL SDR dongle is a small USB device, looks a lot like a USB thumb drive, jump drive, data stick, or flash drive, basically a hunk of plastic with a USB connector on it. An RTL SDR dongle generally also has some form of antenna connector. It's typically sold as a digital radio and digital television receiver, but websites like rtl-sdr.com sell purpose-built ones. They can be found starting at about $15. I realize that this is using a local receiver with a local antenna, but it's inside a web browser, which is half of what I expected. When you hit the play button in the bottom of the screen, you'll be prompted by your web browser to give permission to access your RTL SDR dongle, and the fun starts. You'll see a live waterfall, hear audio, and have the ability to tune to any frequency you can reach. Depending on your dongle, typically somewhere between 500 kHz and 1.76 GHz. The application consists of 7 files, a total of 352 kilobytes that you can store on any web server and run, with one caveat. In order for your web browser to talk to your dongle, it needs to be served using HTTPS. Yakobo has set up radio.echoalpha1indiatangoindia.echosierra, and I've set up sdr.vk6flab.com, both showing the same tool. You'll find the code on my VK6FLAB GitHub repository, and of course on Yakobo's. There are some things you need to know. You will need to use a web browser that supports Web USB. Currently that's Chrome, Edge, Opera, and several others. Sorry, Safari and Firefox don't. Perhaps it's time to talk to Apple and Mozilla. All is explained if you click on the little question mark at the bottom of the screen. It will even tell you if the browser you're using to read the help is compatible or not. If you have an Android phone, you can run this tool too, although you will need to find a way to connect your dongle to your phone. I'm currently limited in my ability to test this, and you may need to install some drivers on Windows and Linux, but macOS and presumably Android works out of the box. This software also supports offline operation, so you can load it as a progressive web app or PWA, and use it in the field away from the internet. Did I mention that all the decoding is happening inside the web browser, so you can see which code is doing what? And, before you ask, yes, it's minimized in the browser, which you can make into human-readable code, but when you look at the source, it shows precisely what is happening, all written in Node.js, TypeScript, and JavaScript. It supports CW, SSB, AM, narrow and wideband FM, and decodes stereo, something which none of my amateur radios do. You might be able to tell that I'm excited. It's because this is providing the basic functionality of a radio inside a web browser, and I didn't need to install it to get started. On the Macintosh I tested this on, I literally opened the web page, plugged in a dongle, and hit play. Just so we're clear, just because this is using a web page on a web server, you accessing it will only give you access to your radio, not mine. This, of course, opens the doors to all manner of other fun stuff, which I'm expecting to play with for the next little while. And yes, this is also Bald Yak adjacent, I'm aware. In the meantime, you can play with this right now. sdr.vk6flab.com is the place to go. Word of warning, it's addictive, and easy to forget it's a radio with an antenna plugged into your computer. So take precautions when electrical storms are about. Look forward to hearing what you discover. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6 Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
For the first time ever, residents are allowed to use certain wireless internet frequencies in the highly restrictive West Virginia Radio Quiet Zone near the Green Bank Observatory. Since it was built in 1956, the observatory, which houses the largest fully steerable radio telescope in the world, has been located in both the National Radio Quiet Zone, which spans several counties in West Virginia and Virginia, and the West Virginia Radio Quiet Zone, which includes a 10-mile radius around the Green Bank Observatory. According to a press release, Wi-Fi radio frequencies can disrupt the frequencies that the telescope reads. Although the use of Wi-Fi routers can disrupt the telescope, the observatory said the quiet zones have not stopped people from installing routers. Many people, who were doing the right thing by not using Wi-Fi, were left without access, while others who were illegally using routers did whatever they wanted, Anthony Ramajan, director, explained in the release. Now, instead of limiting the use of all Wi-Fi routers, the Green Bank Observatory is encouraging everyone in the West Virginia Radio Quiet Zone to operate at the same frequency, 2.4 GHz. This will allow residents, businesses, and schools in the Quiet Zone to have Wi-Fi while also preventing multiple radio frequencies from being interfered with. Updating our policy and permitting Wi-Fi at 2.4 GHz in the West Virginia Radio Quiet Zone allows us to be realistic about what's happening around the observatory and clearly define what areas of radio frequency interference our staff should be focused on, Chris Dupree, head of National Radio Astronomy Observatory's Spectrum Management Department, said in the release. Melissa Jordan, principal at Green Bank Elementary and Middle School, which was the only school in the area and possibly the country that still didn't have Wi-Fi, said that the change is very positive for the school. Our students now have the same equal opportunities as others in the county. Green Bank officials will also be giving out informational handouts and holding presentations in Green Bank and the surrounding communities over the next few months. The observatory said it's still working with certain satellite, phone, and internet providers to develop systems that will keep those signals away from the telescope. Another area that residents are concerned for is first responder and emergency services communications. Last year, a number of counties in the National Radio Quiet Zone in both West Virginia and Virginia expressed concern with the lack of options to meet those needs.
The SETI Institute's Allen Telescope Array, or ATA, recently played host to 16 scientists, engineers, and technologists who gathered for a 3-day hackathon to develop novel capabilities for the observatory. Sponsored by the Amateur Radio Digital Charitable Foundation, in collaboration with the SETI Institute, the Breakthrough Listen Initiative, and GNU Radio, the hackathon drew participants from across the United States and around the world who were interested in using the ATA for SETI and radio astronomy observations of Earth-orbiting satellites and education, among other topics. The ATA is a 42-antenna array of 6-meter diameter dishes dedicated to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. With recently upgraded receivers capable of increased sensitivity and digital signal processing hardware capable of tuning to more frequency channels at once, the ATA is not only a powerful tool in its own right, but also enables low-level access to data from the antennas, as well as flexible configuration so that users can take control of the entire array at once or individual antennas to carry out different projects simultaneously. The GNU Radio open-source software environment powers one available back-end instrument. A GNU Radio-focused hackathon held at the ATA in 2019 led to the formal joining of GNU Radio with the SETI Institute in 2020. Many radio telescopes, and indeed radio devices more generally, are built with custom hardware to process incoming signals, said Derek Kozel, principal investigator for GNU Radio and the SETI Institute. GNU Radio is changing the paradigm by replacing hardware with easily configurable software, providing scientists and engineers with remarkable flexibility in how they utilize the telescope. And the fact that the software is open source means that anyone can help contribute. Few observatories offer the opportunity for hands-on experimentation, development, and testing that is possible with the ATA, said SETI Institute adjunct senior scientist Steve Croft, who organized the hackathon along with the observatory staff. Hackathon attendees worked on topics as diverse as precise positioning of satellites in geosynchronous orbits, classifying signals and data streaming from the telescope, and making real-time detections of pulsars. We're excited to be able to make the ATA available to the community and to have them contribute to capabilities that will benefit all users of the telescope, said Andrew Simone, Bernard M. Oliver Chair for SETI and the SETI Institute. By working together with partners from academia and industry, we're pushing forward the frontiers of radio astronomy technology and also demonstrating that SETI is an effort where folks with a wide range of backgrounds and skills can help us to achieve our goals. The SETI Institute is a nonprofit, multidisciplinary research and education organization whose mission is to lead humanity's quest to understand the origins and prevalence of life and intelligence in the universe and to share that knowledge with the world. Our research encompasses the physical and biological sciences and leverages expertise in data analytics, machine learning, and advanced signal detection technologies. The SETI Institute is a distinguished research partner for industry, academia, and government agencies, including NASA and NSF.
Welcome to the 41st segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio, Ham's organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Our thanks go out to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website in the preparation of these segments. Now, sit back, relax, and follow along with us as we present this next chapter of ham radio history. First Band, Top Band. On 20 March 1923, Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover convened his second National Radio Conference and, as before, the ARRL was there in force. A May QSD photo shows Maxim at center, flanked by C.F. Jenkins, identified as inventor of radio transmission of photographs, and Major General G.O. Squire, U.S. Army, Chief Signal Officer Paul Godley of Transatlantic's fame, and ARRL Secretary Kenneth Warner can be seen in the background. Besides Maxim and crew, other prominent participants from the radio research community included inventors Edwin Armstrong, Louis Hazeltine, Professor C.M. Jansky, amateurs all, and many others from government, academia, and industry. The majority of the attendees, however, represented the broadcasting industry as expected. After all, the conference's main purpose was to determine what could be done to ease the industry's interference problems by establishing new regulations deemed permissible under the current law, now 11 years old. Since the previous year's attempt at legislation had failed, this was the only path left. To accomplish any meaningful relief, other services had to give up spectrum space to create new wavelengths for the broadcasters. Recommendations included reclaiming the 450-meter maritime wavelength and the amateur extension at 275 meters to create a continuous broadcast band from 222 to 545 meters, approximately 1,351 to 550 kilohertz, which is very close to today's AM broadcast band limits. The government reserve allocation above 600 meters was then recast to include the maritime service that would be displaced from 450 meters. The broadcast band was further divided into Class A stations, those with high power and continuous service, and Class B stations of restricted range and ability. Class B would operate below 286 meters, where wavelength assignments would be made on a geographical basis so as to minimize interference. Assignments for Class A stations above 286 meters would be handled a bit differently. One wavelength would be assigned exclusively to each geographical region, and stations in that region would further divide up the use of the channel into time slices. The conference asserted that this would make it possible to assign 50 such regional wavelengths spaced 10 kilohertz apart. With this scheme in place, anyone with a good receiving setup could tune into various other areas of the country and, conditions permitting, would have some hope of hearing them without interference. 10 local areas within each of the 5 national zones would have allocation separated by 50 kilohertz, and no areas in adjacent zones would be closer than 20 kilohertz. All broadcasters were required to have measuring equipment to ensure that they were operating within 2 kilohertz of their assigned wave frequency, as the rule phrased it. To ease the transition for an existing broadcaster, a temporary classification could be assigned to allow it to continue to use its present allocation until it could obtain a new one and move there. The amateurs would get exclusive use of 150 to 200 meters, 1.5 to 2 megahertz, which is larger than our current 160-meter band, widely called top band by hams. Special license holders would be permitted to operate between 200 and 222, and extra special licensed stations could use some quiet wave below 286 meters for use in the difficult Rocky Mountain region for the benefit of transcontinental relay work. There could be at most 6 of these stations, a severe restriction. Spark transmission was tentatively assigned to 175 to 200 meters, with only straight CW allowed between 200 and 220, and CW, ICW, and phone between 150 and 176 meters. Further subdivision was possible, and the ARRL was asked to recommend allocations by transmission type at a later date. Significantly, everything below 150 meters was designated as reserved but open to special licensing. The department would also require all radio stations to suppress harmonics to a level yet to be specified. And the conference resolved that spark transmitters should be replaced as rapidly as practicable by apparatus which will produce a minimum of interference. It further resolved that amateurs should, by mutual arrangement, observe periods of silence during religious broadcasts on Sundays. To put some teeth into the regulation, it stipulated that the Department of Commerce had the power to minimize or eliminate interference by rescinding licenses, regulating operation, and other means. Although the major conference benefits went to the broadcast industry as intended, nearly all concerned parties were pleased with the outcome, and some wondered why the government had not done this a year earlier instead of expending energy trying to get the legislation passed. The answer would become clear a few years later. The ARRL board was to study the proposed regulations in full and make its own recommendations before they became final. The conference also asked the ARRL to recommend how the 200 to 150 meter amateur allocation might be subdivided. The league board then canvassed the membership across the country to come up with a unified set of recommendations about allocations and other issues that might arise. Although the membership opposed any sort of elaborate subdivision plan based on signal type, there was widespread support for something that would protect the shorter wavelengths from QRM. So, in a proposal similar to, but simpler than, the one made by the conference, the board recommended that all modulated forms of transmission be limited to the band from 176 to 200 meters, and that straight CW be permitted anywhere in the amateur allocation, thus protecting the shorter wavelengths which were increasingly viewed as important by amateurs. This reversed the previous scheme where, like today, broader modes were confined to shorter wavelengths, that is, higher in each frequency band. In a worrisome surprise, the Commerce Department began to recall amateur licenses in order to add a stipulation that no transmitting could occur between 7:30 and 10 p.m., an official mandate for the Rochester Plan. Knowing about the ARRL's voluntary program and realizing that not all amateurs were league members, the department was trying to help, but only ended up alarming most amateurs. After the league explained the difference between how amateurs viewed a voluntary program as opposed to a required one, the department agreed to suspend further action and only apply the new regulation to new licenses until the ARRL board could consider it. With unanimous objection, the board concluded that such a mandatory regulation was undesirable and, in particular, would obviously prohibit operation during emergencies. The department's action would remain pending. The league also suggested that the amateur allocation be expanded to 220 meters in a more formal manner and establish an extra first-grade amateur operator's license, which would conform to the 1912 law permitting special licenses. Action on this was also still pending. Meanwhile, all of the old 375-meter special licenses were being recalled since that wavelength was now part of the broadcast band.
We'll continue this segment next week.
Included in this material are quotes from the following: Kenneth B. Warner, Second National Radio Conference, QSD, May 1923, page 12. Kenneth B. Warner, Amateur Regulations, Editorial, QSD, June 1923, page 35. Kenneth B. Warner, The New Amateur Regulations, QSD, August 1923, page 13. With great appreciation to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, in the preparation of this segment, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. If you enjoy the digital aspect of ham radio and are not a satellite operator, you can do APRS and FT4 on satellite. Some of today's satellites have special functions. Take NO44 and Sonate 2. Their specialty is for APRS. They use the same up and down link frequencies, 145.825 MHz. This keeps them from activating every APRS receiver on Earth as they pass over. During Field Day this year, several of the sites used RS-44 for FT4 contacts. RS-44 is an inverting linear satellite where you can use sideband, CW, as well as FT4. CW and FT4 stay near the lower part of the passband. A linear satellite such as RS-44 uses 2-meter LSB up and 70-centimeter USB down. This might sound confusing. However, it has to do with interference. In many parts of the world, the 2-meter band has a lot of noise. The 70-centimeter band, on the other hand, is much quieter, thus the 2-meter up and the 70-centimeter down. The satellite then does what we call inverting of the signal. It takes it from LSB up and converts it to USB down. Now you have it. Little confusing, but understandable. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for our weekly look at solar weather and the latest propagation forecast. On August 22nd, SpaceWeather.com reported a fast-moving coronal mass ejection left the Sun on August 21st. However, it was not Earth-directed, and is predicted to strike the planet Mars. Solar activity has decreased back to low levels with a few weak C-class flares observed from areas located in the northeast quadrant of the solar disk. There are currently 3 sunspot regions on the solar disk, with the largest being region AR 4187. This region showed some weak leader spot growth. The remaining 2 regions were quiet and stable. Solar wind parameters reflected negative polarity coronal hole high speed stream influences. A disturbed solar wind environment is likely to continue through August 22nd. There is a slight chance for R1 minor radio blackouts through August 23rd due to the anticipated return of old active regions. Probabilities increase slightly to a chance for an isolated event, most likely from the east limb, on August 24 as old active regions return to view. Active conditions are likely to return again on August 28 due to negative polarity coronal hole high-speed stream influences. Periods of G1 to G2, which are minor to moderate storming, is likely on September 5, with active conditions likely on September 4 and again on September 6, due to positive polarity coronal hole high-speed stream influences. The remainder of the reporting period is expected to be at quiet or quiet to unsettled levels. Higher solar activity in the first half of August was caused mainly by 2 sunspot groups, out of a total of 11 to 13, whose magnetic configuration allowed for the occurrence of moderately powerful Class M eruptions. After their disappearance, the number of groups dropped to 3 to 5, while only energetically insignificant eruptions sporadically occurred. Changes in the speed of the solar wind and the concentration of particles in it had a significant impact on the Earth's ionosphere. As usual, the source on the Sun was the boundaries of coronal holes. After a brief calm in the geomagnetic field from August 13 to the 15th, turbulent developments followed from August 19. At the beginning, the speed of the solar wind rapidly increased from 350 to 650 km per second, which was accompanied by a change in the polarity of the longitudinal component of the interplanetary magnetic field to positive in a relatively long interval from 1130 to 1630 UTC. Therefore, the deterioration of shortwave propagation conditions was only slight, while the maximum usable frequency decline was delayed. We are now likely to see a series of relatively calm days, probably until August 27. Major disturbances are not expected to occur until around September 5, when the Earth will enter the same stream of solar particles as it did around August 9. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the vocap online for ham radio website.
Just ahead in radio sport this week, August 23rd, the Turkey HF single sideband contest, that is phone. On the 23rd and 24th, the Hawaii QSO party, CW phone and digital. And on the 23rd and 24th as well of August, the Ohio QSO party, that's CW and phone. August 24th, the SARL HF CW contest, CW. August 25th, the K1USN slow speed test, that is CW. August 26th, the QCX challenge, CW there. August 27th, the phone weekly test, that is phone. And on August 29th, it's the NCC FT4 Sprint, that is digital. Remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions on August 21st to the 24th. It's the Northeast Ham Exposition, hosting the ARRL New England Division Convention. That's in Marlborough, Massachusetts. August 30th through September 1st, the Shelby Ham Fest, hosting the ARRL North Carolina Section Convention in Shelby, North Carolina. September 7th, the Southern New Jersey Conference and Ham Fest, hosting the ARRL New Jersey Section Convention in Mullica Hill, New Jersey. September 12th to the 13th, the Slidell EOC Hamfest, hosting the ARRL Louisiana State Convention. That's in Slidell, Louisiana. September 19th to the 21st, the Duke City Hamfest, hosting the ARRL New Mexico State Convention in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And on September 20th through the 21st, the Midwest Superfest, hosting the ARRL Central Division Convention. That's in Chillicothe, Illinois. And remember to search the ARRL Hamfest and Convention database to find more events in your area.
The threat of that tsunami in Hawaii is calling attention to an effort by broadcasters in Honolulu to regain access to police scanner information. Media outlets have been unable to access police and fire scanner radio communications since February 2022, when a new digital system began encrypting the frequencies used by the city's emergency agencies. Broadcasters are working to change that, and a bill under consideration in the Honolulu City Council might get the job done. The media and public safety timing access to emergency-related information is essential to keeping the community safe from dangerous situations such as active shooters, armed and dangerous individuals, and violent crimes, the proposed bill says. It adds that the release of timely and accurate information to broadcasters and other media outlets helps in the prevention of misinformation spreading within the community, which it says can cause panic and public distrust. To access the information, the proposal says a station would need to hold a valid license from the Federal Communications Commission or have a verifiable track record of professional journalism. Journalists don't simply broadcast what they hear, they use scanner traffic to mobilize teams, verify facts, and prepare accurate newscasts for the public.
It's time for this week's AMSAT satellite shorts from all over. This week we start with a report from NASA that astronaut James A. Lovell, Captain, U.S. Navy retired, veteran of the Gemini 7, Gemini 12, and Apollo 8 missions, before becoming the mission commander for the nearly disastrous Apollo 13 mission to the moon, died on August 7th at the age of 97. Lovell joined NASA in 1962 as part of its second group of astronauts. He was selected as a backup commander to Neil Armstrong for the Apollo 11 lunar landing mission, and would have been the fifth human to walk on the moon had it not been for the Apollo 13 problem. Next, astronomers using the NASA, ESA, CSA, James Webb Space Telescope have found strong evidence of a giant planet orbiting a star in the stellar system closest to our own sun. Just 4 light-years away from Earth, the Alpha Centauri triple star system has long been a compelling target in the search for worlds beyond our own solar system. If confirmed, the planet would be the closest to Earth that orbits in the habitable zone of a sun-like star. However, because the planet candidate is a gas giant, scientists say it would not support life as we know it. AMSAT Deutschland will host the Bochum Space Days event from September 19th through the 21st, 2025. In cooperation with the Bochum Observatory, AMSAT Deutschland is offering a varied and informative program aimed at AMSAT members and all space enthusiasts. The focus is on current developments and future prospects for national and international amateur radio satellites and other space projects. Lectures, presentations, and exciting discussions will provide participants with valuable insights into the latest technologies, missions, and research projects in space travel. And finally this week, SpaceX is now offering Starship flights to Mars, with Italy signing up as the first customer to send payloads. However, there is no announced start date for providing the service.
The Fort Myers Amateur Radio Club in Florida and local operators volunteering as part of the ARRL Amateur Radio Emergency Service will participate in the Jamboree on the Air. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has all the details on the upcoming event.
Jamboree on the Air is the largest scouting event in the world and is held on the third full weekend of October each year, bringing together over 1 million participants from more than 160 countries and offering scouts a unique opportunity to learn critical emergency preparedness and communication skills. This year, the FMARC event will operate like a regular field day, with every station acting as a get-on-the-air go-to station, said event chairman Rob Botnick, K04RDZ. The new participation will help scouts get on the air and complete Step 9A of the BSA Radio Merit Badge by logging 10 to 15 QSOs in a 10-minute period. Aries participation will add a new focus on Step 10A of the BSA Emergency Preparedness Merit Badge, giving scouts hands-on experience with emergency communications. We are thrilled to have Aries join us for this year's Jamboree on the Air, said Bobnick. Their expertise in emergency communications will provide an invaluable learning experience for the scouts. This partnership aligns perfectly with our mission to recruit, train, and help ham radio operators provide essential emergency services to our community. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The Fort Myers Amateur Radio Club is an ARRL-affiliated club. To learn more about Jamboree on the Air, visit www.scouting.org.
A respected member of the DXing community has passed away. Louis Dietrich, November 2, Tango Uniform, became a silent key on August 15th at the age of 78. John Ross, Kilo Delta 8, India Delta Juliet, has more.
Dietrich was the former chairman of the board of directors of the International DX Association, INDEXA. He was known as a dedicated advocate for international goodwill through radio and a passionate advocate for the mission of INDEXA. He played a pivotal role in guiding INDEXA through the years of significant growth and impact. Beyond his contributions to Indexa, Lou was a mentor, teammate, and friend to many in the global amateur radio community, said Indexa President Otis Vissens, NP4G. His enthusiasm for DXpeditions, his steadfast leadership, and his generous spirit will be greatly missed. Dietrich served on the ARRLDX Advisory Committee. He achieved the ARRLDXCC Top of the Honor Roll and 10-band DXCC. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Dietrich was a part of many well-known DXpeditions, including leading the 2013 Kilo 9 Whiskey Wake Island operation and was a participant in the 2015 Kilo 1 November activation of Navassa Island. He was a team co-leader for the 2016 Kilo 5 Papa Palmyra DXpedition and of recent activations on Sable Island and St. Paul Island. Dietrich was a member of the Carolina DX Association and an ARRL member. He is survived by his wife, Hilda. Funeral arrangements have not yet been announced.
Continuing the FCC's strong enforcement efforts to protect essential radio transmissions in the U.S., they have ordered the owners of a spa in Florida to immediately cease operation of a device that was interfering with AT&T FirstNet cellular network. Agents from the Miami office of the FCC responded to the interference using direction-finding techniques. Their investigation identified a Bluetooth speaker located at Asian Touch Spa that was the source of the interference. When requested by agents, employees at the spa turned off the speaker determined to be the source. The agents were later able to confirm that the interference to AT&T FirstNet cellular network had ceased as a result.
Austin Ayers, WX3SVR, is running for U.S. Congress with a campaign focusing on the rights of the amateur radio community. In an email sent to Amateur Radio Daily, WX3SVR described 3 bills he'd planned to introduce if he's elected. The Amateur Radio Accessibility and Antenna Rights Act. If elected, he would introduce legislation to prevent homeowners associations, condominium boards, and other private entities from enforcing any such rules that could ban antennas from being installed. He would also prevent such boards and agencies from throwing requests for antennas into a bottomless pit and guideline the maximum of 30 days to issue approval. Amateur Radio Spectrum Protection and Expansion Act. If elected, he would introduce and sponsor a bill that would protect and expand the amateur radio spectrum. This would prevent our spectrum from being reallocated to commercial users and allow for bandwidth expansion to accommodate larger limits for modern digital modes. The Amateur Radio Emergency Communications Enhancement Act. The Amateur Radio Emergency Communications Enhancement Act would authorize registered nonprofit clubs that provide emergency communications to get access to apply for grants through FEMA and DHS while requiring FEMA and state EMAs to include trained and licensed amateur radio operators in their disaster response plans. I would also introduce a tax credit for licensed operators who purchase equipment that will be used for emergency communications. More information about Austin Ayers' campaign can be found on his website.
The Canadian Space Agency's CubeSats initiative for STEM, a project known as Cubics, is moving ahead toward the manufacturing phase after its design passed final review recently. Professors and their students are involved in the design, build, and launch of satellites as part of Cubics at 9 universities. Ultimately, the 9 3U CubeSats are to be deployed next year by ExoLaunch, a German launch services company based in Berlin. The satellites will conduct a number of experiments relevant to amateur radio and utilize the ham spectrum for their command and control. They will also conduct research on wildlife migration, monitor oceanic and atmospheric changes, and study radiation mitigating technologies that can be used in space. The payload will include digipeaters as well as digital and CW telemetry beacons.
Authorities in India have announced a crackdown on the listing and sale of handheld transceivers from China that they say break laws governing consumer protection and the unauthorized use of radio frequencies. Stories in various Indian media outlets identify some of the 13 e-commerce sellers in question as Facebook, Amazon, Flipkart, and IndiaMart, among others. The nation's Consumer Affairs Commissioner, Prahlad Joshi, said that the violations of the India Telegraph Act, the Wireless Telegraph Act, and rules governing the use of low and very low power shortwave RF devices were being broken. Acting as an advocate for radio users, the West Bengal Radio Club Secretary, Ambarish Nag Biswas, VU2JFA, told the Statesman website that users of these radio sets could interfere with police and other agencies' communications and gather sensitive information related to national security.
The newest award series available from the Radio Society of Great Britain is open to anyone, anywhere in the world. But the real winners are most likely to be hams throughout the United Kingdom and its crown dependencies. That's because these awards encourage people to make contact with them. Available at many different levels of achievement, the new Worked All UK and Crown Dependency Prefix Awards recognizes contacts among United Kingdom amateurs themselves, as well as those from around the world with United Kingdom amateurs. There are awards for collecting prefixes in Scotland, in the Crown Dependencies, and even the United Kingdom. The top award is called, just as its name suggests, the Worked United Kingdom Prefixes Supreme Award. Details of how to achieve this award or any of its subsets can be found on the RSGB website.
The planned de-expedition for South Georgia Island in March of 2027 isn't just about activating one of the rarest and more challenging sites for portable amateur radio. A central focus for the team will be its role in mentoring the young radio amateurs who will be accompanying the more experienced operators to the sub-Antarctic island. The team, using the call sign VP0SG, will be giving the youngsters top priority. Project team leader Rune, LA7THA, said in a release that 1 or 2 licensed young operators are expected to be part of the operations on the island. He said they'll be involved in every phase of the expedition, from setup and daily operations to teardown, working alongside veteran de-expeditioners in challenging real-world conditions. He said the team is working closely with the Northern California DX Foundation on this initiative, which is in sync with so many amateur radio youth engagement activities around the world. Meanwhile, there's much work to be done on this environmentally sensitive DX entity with its mountainous landscape and volatile weather pattern. The shore camp will have 5 operating positions, but details still remain unclear on additional stations that are capable of being operated remotely. Rune said the final team composition and operating plans also need to be fine-tuned. The expedition fulfills the mission of the Norway-based amateur radio de-expeditions, which devotes itself to giving hams around the world the chance to contact remote parts of the globe.
4 new crew members are adjusting to life on the International Space Station and gearing up for several months of microgravity research to benefit humans living on and off the Earth. Meanwhile, another quartet that has been orbiting Earth since March is packing up and handing over responsibilities to the new crew before returning to Earth this week. Expedition 73 expanded to 11 individuals on Saturday, August 2nd, when NASA's SpaceX Crew 11 mission docked to the orbital outpost aboard the Dragon spacecraft after launching from Florida about 15 hours earlier. Crew 11's commander and pilot, Zena Cardman, Kilo Juliet 5, Charlie Mike November, and Mike Finke, Kilo Echo 5, Alpha India Tango, both from NASA, and mission specialists Kimia Yui, Kilo Golf 5, Bravo Papa Hotel from the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and Oleg Platnov from Roscosmos spent the weekend unpacking their Dragon spacecraft, reviewing safety procedures, and getting familiar with space station systems. The crew is well trained for its space research program and will soon begin investigating a wide variety of microgravity phenomena to gain insights only achievable in space. They will explore manufacturing high-quality stem cells, alternatives to antibiotics to treat bacterial infections, cell division in plants to promote space agriculture, and more. NASA astronauts Anne McLean and Nicole Ayers, Kilo Juliet 5, Golf Whiskey India, along with JAXA astronaut Takuya Onisha, Kilo Foxtrot 5, Lima Kilo Sierra, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov are helping their new crewmates get up to speed with living and working on the orbital lab. NASA's SpaceX Crew 10 crewmates also will be going home this week aboard another Dragon spacecraft, completing a 5-month mission. During their stay in space, the crew studied space-caused mental and physical changes in astronauts, blood flow from the brain to the heart, future lunar navigation techniques, and more. The homebound foursome has spent the last 2 weeks gathering personal items and cargo for loading inside Dragon. Over the next couple of days, Crew 10 will also pack critical research samples stowed in portable science freezers inside Dragon for retrieval and analysis back on Earth. During the final cargo packing and scientific sample stowing duties, the crew will also review departure procedures before entering Dragon and undocking. NASA astronaut Johnny Kim, Kilo Juliet 5, Hotel Kilo Papa, and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Rizikov and Alexei Zabritsky will continue their mission aboard the station and conduct their complement of space research until December. The trio have been assisting with the crew swap activities as Kim helped Pinky learn to work out on the advanced resistive exercise device. Rizikov showed the Crew 11 foursome the location of emergency hardware and how to use NASA and Roscosmos station hardware. Zabritsky helped Peskov as he tested the lower body negative pressure suit that may counteract space-caused head and eye pressure and help crews adjust quicker to the return to Earth's gravity.
Several international amateur radio union societies, and now more than 2,000 individuals, have filed their concerns with the U.S. Federal Communication Commission over a request by a U.S. broadband communications company to use the frequencies between 430 and 440 MHz for a planned constellation of 240 commercial satellites. AST SpaceMobile was recently approved for the use of the amateur radio band on an experimental basis for a low Earth orbit satellite known as FM1, which is the prototype for the company's planned mobile phone connectivity from space. The FCC has assigned the call sign WP2XRX, which does not expire until July of 2027. The Radio Society of Great Britain, referring on its website to its own filing to the FCC, said that the company's proposal for its constellation has stirred an unprecedented response from the amateur radio community. Radio Amateurs of Canada participated during the reply phase of this proceeding, which concluded on August 5, 2025. They coordinated closely with the ARRL to ensure Canada's response was both complementary and constructive. The shared goal is to uphold and defend amateur radio access to the 430 to 440 MHz band. RAC has also consulted with Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, ensuring that Canadian regulatory authorities are aware of the proposal and the concerns voiced by Canadian amateurs. Obviously, the International Amateur Radio Union has also waded in, expressing concern, as has the Willis Institute of Australia. In speaking with the WIA secretary and ascertaining the board had dropped a submission to the FCC.
MESAT-1, or MO-122, Maine's first research satellite developed by the University of Maine and with collaboration from AMSAT Engineering, was a finalist for the SmallSat Rookie of the Year Award, which is sponsored by the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. The public was encouraged to cast their vote online to boost MESAT-1 to victory as the top rookie small satellite mission. Voting was free and open to everyone through August 12th. MESAT-1 was among 7 small satellites vying for the title. Launched into orbit on July 4, 2024, MESAT-1 was developed to get students involved in space science. The cost-effective nanosatellite, which measures 11.8 inches, is outfitted with 4 multispectral cameras that were designed to capture climate-related Earth imagery for experiments designed by Maine K-12 students. An AMSAT-provided LTM-1 linear transponder provides services to amateur radio enthusiasts around the world. In October of 2024, at the request of University of Maine, AMSAT designated MESAT-1 as MESAT-1 Oscar 122, or MO 122. Access to space data motivates and excites students to learn fundamental skills in mathematics and science and helps them see the importance of STEM careers, said UMaine Vice President for Research and Dean of the Graduate School, Koti Veeraramayan, who led the establishment of UMaine's Space Initiative. Being selected as a finalist for SmallSat Rookie of the Year is a national recognition of what Maine students and their faculty researchers can accomplish together. Finalists for the SmallSat Award included teams from the University of Arizona, the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, and international missions from Senegal and Croatia. MESAT-1 stands out as a mission that empowered K-12 students from Falmouth High School, Freiburg Academy, and Saco Middle School to contribute to space exploration. The winner, announced during the 39th Annual Small Satellite Conference, held August 10th through the 13th in Salt Lake City, was CrowCube, the first Croatian satellite. CrowCube also operates as an amateur radio satellite with a CW beacon and a GFS K9 K6 AX.25 G3 RUH telemetry beacon at 436.775 MHz. MESAT-1 was designed, built, and tested by students and faculty at UMaine in partnership with the University of Southern Maine, the Wells National Estuarine Research Reserve, and AMSAT, the Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation, with support from NASA and the Maine Space Grant Consortium. The satellite's development and integration for launch was led by Ali Abedi, who formerly served as Associate Vice President for Research and a professor at UMaine. This effort is part of a broader UMaine Space Initiative, which is working to develop a skilled space workforce and grow Maine's presence in the space economy, including plans for a future Maine spaceport complex. This recognition puts Maine on the map as a state that not only builds satellites, but also builds opportunities for students, teachers, researchers, and entrepreneurs, Perrine said.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon.
And our final story this week takes us to the mountains of Colorado. Devin Gross, KM7ANM of Renton, Washington, is getting married on August 30th, 2025. And he has a little different activity for the least part of the day. Wedding Day QSOs from Mount Princeton in Colorado. He is asking for help from amateur radio operators to make his wedding day extra special. What's normally referred to as a Summits on the Air activation will operate from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. MST on 14.235 MHz, single sideband. If 14.235 is busy, he will QSY and announce a new frequency. I'll be operating portable from this stunning Colorado peak on the morning of my wedding, and I'd love nothing more than to log some memorable QSOs with the ham community before I head down to say I do. He added, "This will be a once-in-a-lifetime wedding day activation with great propagation from 14,115 feet elevation, and QSL cards with a special wedding theme will be sent to all contacts." The ARRL letter asked Gross 2 important questions. First, does your XYL-to-be know about the wedding day on the air? And second, will you be wearing your amateur radio name badge on your tuxedo? The answer to the first question is yes. In fact, Gross says she's pretty cool about the idea, as long as he makes it to the wedding on time. As for wearing his name badge on this tux, he said he would like to, probably not this time. He also added that his wife does not have her amateur radio license yet, but as an early wedding gift, 2 handheld radios are on order. From hams everywhere, congratulations. Make sure you pay attention to your wedding band first and the ham bands second.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard all around the world on the amateur bands, and on great repeater systems like the KB3 CNN Gateway FM Association repeater, on 146.730 MHz every Tuesday evening at 7:30 p.m., covering the wide area of western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. If your repeater system carries This Week in Amateur Radio, let us know via email, and we will mention your station in an upcoming edition. Send your information to w2xbs77@gmail.com.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you would like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and all our news team around the world, this is Will Rogers, K5WLR in Fayetteville, Arkansas, wishing you 73.